and welcome to Back to the Basics, a series and show where we have honest conversations about mental health. On this inaugural episode, we're starting light and fun by talking about the 96th Academy Awards, also known as the Oscars, which took place on Sunday, March 10th. We'll be recapping some big moments from the show and hitting on some films in particular like Oppenheimer, The Holdovers, Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, and Poor Things, and addressing the mental health undertones. But first, before we get started, some introductions are in order. I'm Kayla. I've been at Taloha on and off in so many different capacities since my internship in 2018. I'm from Arkansas, so if my Southern accent slips out a bit, please ignore it. I like to think that I'm an interesting person, but when it gets down to it, I really love the same things as everyone else. Dogs, reading, traveling anytime I get. I am a Sagittarius, Enneagram 4, and INFP for anyone who cares. Take it away, Becky.
I'm Becky, or you can call me Bex, take your pick. I've been at Taloha for 7 years and I live in the state of New York, but I consider myself to be an honorary Canadian thanks to proximity, hockey, and Tim Hortons. One of the best decisions I ever made was adopting my dog, Bucky, 6 years ago. I love to write and read fanfic. My current fixation is Heartstopper, and my favorite food is Thai.
What is up? I'm Kat. I currently live in Colorado, but I'm from the Midwest, so you probably hear some fun Midwest accent there. I've been at Try Love for almost 8 years, and I love everything reading, backpacking, and being creative. And I just have a hodgepodge of different hobbies.
Hey besties, I'm Cody. I've been at Twilio for almost 2 years. I live in Pennsylvania. The most important thing I can share about myself is my love, dedication, and passion for my queen, Taylor Allison Swift, or Dr. Taylor Allison Swift. If knowing that I'm an Aquarius who loves Taylor Swift doesn't tell you all you need to know, I don't know what will.
First, before we get into the specific movies, let's talk about moments that we loved, speeches, jokes, performances, anything like that. Does anyone have anything?
First thing for me, Emma Stone's acceptance speech. And I think a key point of at least theme of the end of the show was kind of community, and that it takes multiple people in order to create something good or whatever it is. And that theme just relied heavily on the fact of taking the individual out. It's an award show and we're honoring individuals for their work. However, recognizing that it requires so many different people, so many different voices to create a story, to make a story, to encourage, all of these different things, from going from this is an idea to a full-fledged film, piece of art, whatever it is. It requires multiple people. And obviously Ken. The Ken performance was the thing I was looking forward to the whole entire time.
Okay.
Yeah, the hot pink suit with the rhinestones, I can't lie. I was in for it. You didn't like it?
You were eating it up. I did not like it. I was just like, we get it. The song annoyed me when I watched it in Barbie, and I didn't like it at the Oscars either.
You just don't like the song? Or is there
Correct.
Something for?
I just don't like the song. I think the song's annoying.
What Was I Made For was, I feel like that song is just super powerful. And then watching Billy perform it at the Oscars, I did the recap because I wasn't able to watch live, but it's magical. Billy just has a way of making the moment so you're there immersed in the song. And so the lyrics are just so beautiful. Mm-hmm. I have been having that song on repeat since the moment it came out.
It is a really great song. I think another thing for me, one of my favorite parts of the whole show, it happened towards the beginning of it, but was Divine Joy Randolph's winning that award for supporting actress. I obviously loved The Holdovers. Cody will get to you not liking it, but I absolutely loved it. And I think just seeing her expression, just that joy, it was funny because I had my nephew River, who's turning 4 soon, with me, and he kind of said, he goes, those tears are happy tears, she's not sad. And I again was like, no, she's not sad. I was like, she's just feeling very emotional, it's coming out in this way. So it was a really cool moment just to see him recognize that you can cry and not have it mean I'm sad. It can also be an expression of happiness, relief, joy, all of that. And I loved that moment.
But my favorite part of the Oscars, 100%, it was John Cena. I'm sorry. It was good. Y'all can't tell me you wasn't watching it. I was watching it. It was good. No, but also being a real one, loved how they had the people, the past winners of the main categories, introduce the nominees as opposed to just having. I loved that, especially just any chance for me to see Jennifer Lawrence on a stage, I'm here for it. So I was like, they showed Jennifer Lawrence, I was about screaming. I was so excited.
Yeah. I love seeing the friendship between like Emma Stone and Jennifer Lawrence. Like immediately you were just like, oh, they love each other. There is like some type of camaraderie there. And it was so wholesome. But yeah, I agree. That was great. That was awesome.
So now let's get into the films, what we saw, felt, and took away from them. Start with the Holdovers, and Cody, you start with spilling your tea on why you didn't like it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Why Cody didn't like my favorite film.
Okay, here's the thing. I think it was a good movie, right? I like the story that is being told. I thought it was really good. I thought it was well told. It was just like it wasn't a lot happening. Like it felt very slow, and it felt like not this exact story, but I feel like this idea of like these stories of like these people who are like, oh, they couldn't go home for Christmas or whatever, and then they have community now. I feel like I've seen this story before, and that I think what to me was like, I was like, it's not anything crazy. I think everyone did well. The movie was fine. It didn't stand out to me is really what it was. Like I watched the other two I watched were Oppenheimer and Barbie, and like it was like it was there. It wasn't bad, but I wasn't like, this is so good. Oscars all around. It was like, okay, you made a movie, it was fine.
I really loved the pacing because to me, it felt like a very poignant expression of a real pacing experience of people going through, like in the midst of they're in it and each of their own stories. They're like, most of the main characters are grappling with something pretty big in their life, and they're now all stuck for like X amount of days together, and this natural flow of like, there's some weird interactions, and like it takes a few days for people to kind of warm up to each other, and I loved it. It didn't feel super slow to me because I felt like I was actually experiencing in real time their journey of like getting to know each other on a deeper level in this like more personal social way.
Yeah, I thought it was cute. Like when I was watching, I was like, oh, like this story is like heartwarming, but it was just like there's a lot of heartwarming movies. It was like it wasn't bad. It didn't feel like Oscar worthy to me.
Years past, like some of the movies that have won for like best picture at the Oscars have quite literally just been these slice of life films, and a lot of people would be like, oh, that's too artsy, it's very artsy, it's boring, like that type of situation. Whereas you have Oppenheimer obviously winning, we'll get to that, but like you have Oppenheimer, a lot of visual effects, things like that. It's a pretty intense story. With the Holdovers, though, I would vote, like Kat said, it's this slice of life. You feel like you're watching this play out in real time. It's not really sped up. You're like, this is over the course of a few days or like a week. And what I loved most about it is that we talk a lot about identity and feeling like you belong somewhere. And this was kind of like three people who don't have that. They don't necessarily have a group that they belong to. Yes, you have like the professor who has found this like space, safe space at least, at working at this school. This kid is at the school, and then you have the cook at the school. Like they're all stuck in the same spot, but they don't really belong anywhere, or they don't really have that community. And it's kind of seeing them, they're all strangers. They're not comfortable with each other, but then they find that space to connect, which is huge. And they're all very different, age different, demographics, like everything is different. But them finding that same similarity or that same wavelength of needing other people, and all kind of going through different, you have grief, you have the stigma of the main kid with like losing his dad, like, well, not losing his dad, but having his dad be in like a psychiatric hospital, and the stigma of him not being able to visit him, talk to him, things like that. And then you have like the professor who's basically on his own. He's dealing with that separation. And I think the whole entire thing of it, yeah, it has a specific pace to it. But really at like the heart of it, it's just seeing these people not necessarily have a place where they belong, and then kind of finding that belonging through their own kind of struggles, experiences, things like that.
I love like aesthetically the camera angles and the editing and the music. Yeah. It felt, and I don't know, I loved that whole visual experience. The other movie that I watched that I loved was like Poor Things, in terms of like how it was filmed, what editing went into it, and some of the music choices and different like costume moments and different things, set design. My favorite character on the Holdovers was Mary. Like, I love her character and what she did for and how she propelled the character development for the other two. That she was my favorite. I felt like she was kind of like, she said what the audience wanted someone to say to these people, where it's like, oh, thank you. Like, and she was so honest with her story unabashedly, and her grief and her pain, but also holding space for others while holding an accountability to, like, hey, when you're interacting with people, like, you know, show some respect. Like, you're allowed to have a tough time, but there's also this nature of, like, your pain cannot, like, there's a level of where it shouldn't also inflict pain on others. And I thought that was really endearing, her voice of reason to the other two.
It was almost as if she had like this built-in compassion because she had experienced grief. Mm-hmm. So she could already see how other people were hurting, but she wasn't quiet about pointing like shitty things out.
Yeah, when I was watching, I was even thinking her character was the only one that I cared about. And I was like watching, I was like, I was really invested in her story and how she was affecting the plot. When we're talking about the Oscar win, as much as I wanted America Ferrera to have that, because purely just for that Barbie monologue, if it wasn't going to be America Ferrera, I'm glad it was her, because her character was the sole aspect of that movie that I really enjoyed. And I did think there was a lot of depth to her character that was what was pushing the story forward. The other people, I get where their depth was coming from. I just didn't connect to it, so it just wasn't as impactful to me.
Before we get to the end, wrapping up Holdovers, I had these 2 quotes from the movie I wanted us to talk about. Well, at least just this one. He's not entitled to my story, so I don't have to tell them. I thought that was like a really, I mean, he's lying to this person and he's like fibbing, but like when the guy was like, we're Barton men, we don't lie, like he was just articulating like, he's not entitled to my story, so I don't have to tell them. I thought there was something super poignant, because I think sometimes we think like, oh, like I have to be like, especially in this try love world, like your story is important, be honest with your story. There's like this, I do think there's this safety or boundary that is important when you are still in the midst of your story, you're still discovering who you are, and you're in process, that like sharing it first with trusted people like this crew before, to help define the narrative for yourself, since you are still in that exploration stage, like having certain people that are safe and trusted speak into the narrative. So when you're defining it, it is more done in this way where it's not as like, if you tell your story well and you process it to someone else that's not like knows you that super well, you can the impact that has on your narrative can be pretty like detrimental. So then when you get to the like process, like this is my story, you have all these pieces potentially that are like defining yourself that actually aren't true. And so I just thought that was like, that stuck out to me and made me think a ton about like even how I've defined my narrative and who I've let speak into it, and what pieces that I'm like, well, now I'm looking back, I would like to like let go of some of those narratives because they're just not true to who I am.
Yeah, I also think it lends itself to like the vulnerability invites vulnerability. So he obviously, with this person that he doesn't really have like a relationship with, and then he's forming relationships with these other characters, it opens up that space for like, if you're going to be vulnerable about your grief and what you're struggling with, then I might feel like I can as well, because that shame, the guilt, whatever, it doesn't exist there. And you're obviously, I think it opens like the room for compassion. Whereas with this other guy that he's just like passing by, like talking to, he has that moment where he's just like, I don't have to share it with you. I don't have to be completely honest. If I don't feel like I trust you, I feel safe with you. I feel like he's avoiding judgment, obviously, because that's what that whole interaction feels like, is a lot of judgment. And it's in the moment, just like deciding, do I feel comfortable with this person? Are they safe? Is this a safe environment? And there's always obviously like lines, and they're blurry, and you know, you just kind of got to go with what feels right.
You need to give this movie a 1 through 5 stars and just use your hand. Just hold up how many stars you're going to give this movie. Okay. Everybody go.
I didn't watch it.
That's awkward.
I didn't see this.
That's valid.
Wait, Kayla, what did you give it?
Neutral level. I have no opinion.
I am neutral.
Oppenheimer.
What's the quote, Kayla? We're all just living in Oppenheimer's world or something.
Yeah, that Cillian Murphy said in his speech. He said, for better or for worse, it's Oppenheimer's world and we're all living in it. I got chills when he said that. I was like,
same. That hit. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. And then you gotta tack on, though, like him also making the comment about, like, I'm giving this to the peacemakers again. Like,
that was so good.
The real work.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, like, this idea of making a biopic about someone that, because of what his actions led to, like, you would consider not like this is not a role model necessarily. Like, you're not going to call this like a role model or someone that you're looking up to, or like a biopic that you're watching because it's inspiring. You're watching it because it's horrific. But it is not always comprehensible how something so horrific comes to be. And I did feel like the movie being made in general was for that purpose, I feel, to show like how people feel, like individuals feel like they can't do that much, or that their actions don't mean that much. But at the end of the day, it is the actions of people that lead to these things that are bigger than people. The atomic bomb is bigger than Oppenheimer. It's bigger than anyone who worked on it, but though it could not exist without those people. And so it's just this super interesting like commentary and conversation on our individual choices and what they can lead to, and what kind of responsibility we have for systematic and systemic violence and issues. It's just super fascinating.
Yeah, I went into that movie being like, I wonder, like, I was like, I didn't want to watch Oppenheimer. Like, it came out in the summer and I just watched it. Like, I was like, I don't really care. And I was like, is it going to be good? And I started watching it and I was like, oh, okay. There's just like, I was expecting just like another action movie. And I was like, the level of, it's not even mental health undertones. It's the movie it's very mental health related. And like the second half, the end, I guess, the portrayal of his like PTSD that was occurring, I felt like it was captured so well. Like, I felt what he was feeling in those like scenes. It was done so well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those were two big takeaways. Was like PTSD obviously was a really big focus of it. You eventually see like his grief and that guilt that he's feeling, especially like towards the end with the conversation with Einstein. But even towards the very beginning of the film, you see Oppenheimer dealing with depression, that he's a very depressed individual. So like you said, it isn't just undertones in that case, whereas other films, it is an undertone of mental health. But this one, it's like front runner of it. While you're seeing all of these things developing, like getting closer and closer to the atomic bomb, you're seeing how these people are affected mentally and what states they're in throughout like the whole process of it.
And like the slow realization of what they're actually doing. Like, it goes from being this like class group project almost to like, oh, now the military is asking me to move out to this remote location and work on this thing. But it still maybe just feels like a big group project. My buddies were really good at science. It's impressive that we can do this. And it takes a long time for it to ever set in for a lot of the characters. Like, wait, I'm not just doing this math because I'm good at it. Like, there's a purpose and this is going to be used for something. And there's a lot of, like, some of them deal with that through cognitive dissonance, and they tell themselves that it's okay and convince themselves that there are moral reasons that it's okay. And then you see some people handle it with guilt and shame. And I think it was interesting to get to see lots of characters and the different ways that participating in that affected their mental health and what their reactions were.
Mm-hmm. That to me, that scene where they just got the news and then he's having to deliver this like celebration speech, the way it's filmed, and then you see him, even as he's delivering it, his like focus, and the like the earth is shaking, and the like you see these like exuberant, like super really big like celebration expressions, and then he's just wrestling and imagining it but still delivering this like specific narrative. and he's seeing the disaster or the impact of what that atomic bomb just had. And then he's then walking through, and I just feel like the celebration is so dramatic in the filmmaking. And then he goes past and he's having his own experience. He's watching someone break down in tears. Then he watched someone throws up. Like, it's just a very visceral, dramatic, like, expression that just was like captured your whole focus in that moment of just like, this is dynamic. This is like a whole, like, and is going to stay. Like, I felt like at that point in the movie, it was like, now we're about to really walk through like unraveling the impact of this, and the impact it has on people's, like, who are a part of that project, and the people who had to make the decisions, the people who, the communities that were impacted. Like, it was just like I felt like that whole scene was so well done.
Yeah.
I agree.
Something I take away too is just like the fascinating kind of like contrast between, I think towards the beginning of the movie, throughout it, but you see Oppenheimer kind of the way that he sees the world differently than, say, any of us do, in like tiny particles, and he can really kind of break it down to the smallest thing, to an atom. But then I think throughout the movie, he starts to, it's almost like his world expands in a way, and he starts to realize that these tiny little things that he's playing with his group of buddies, like you were saying, Kayla, eventually ends up being this massive chain reaction, which Einstein like alludes to, how it impacts the entire world. Like, it's wild to kind of see him see the world from such a small point, and then how it expands. And he's like, wait, people doing this impacts all these other things across the world. And I thought that was kind of cool to almost see it like zoom out, because you're talking about something so massive, and yet in the beginning he's focused on something so tiny.
Yeah. It was like exactly like when Einstein was talking about, I mean, pretty much what you just said, like the chain, earlier in the movie, he was like talking about the chain reaction. And it's like, while it didn't do the chain reaction they were talking about, there was still a chain reaction of just like, it's not, the world didn't implode, but there still was impact from what they did, which when we got that like final scene, I was like, wow, I need 5 to 6 business days to recover. Okay, what's ratings?
It was too long for me, which,
There we go.
don't even get me started on movies lengths nowadays.
I love a long
I can't
movie.
take it.
Too long.
Too long, but no one needs to hear that.
I have a friend who refuses. Yeah, no, my friend will literally refuse to see movies if they're over like 2 hours and 15 minutes. Like, she's like, nope, even if I'm interested in it, not going. And I'm like, I have not hit that wall, but I get it.
The longer the movie, the better. I love a long movie.
Okay. Poor Things is next, and Cody, that I think was 20 minutes too long. It was too long. 20 minutes too long.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, yeah. Becky, did you not like it?
Really liked it?
No, it's not that I didn't like it. I never need to see it again, but it was 20 minutes too long. Like, there was a few, I'm like, this, like, the pace of it, the pace was fine throughout most of it. And then the last half hour of the film, I was like, I can do without this. Let's wrap it up. I'm ready to go. I'm done.
Yeah. I could see that.
But yeah, I mean, in Poor Things, so we have things like, obviously a focal point is the character with suicide. So if we jump into that, like, initially, I think looking at Bella at the time, which name previously was Victoria, if that's correct.
Yes.
Victoria. Yeah, with Victoria, and seeing that was a means to escape a reality that she was not living a good life, and trying to get out of some environment that she felt very trapped, and that was a choice that she was making. We eventually find out that at the time she was pregnant, and had a baby. I don't know if that played a role in her decision as well. But yeah, dealing with abuse, a very kind of like hate-fueled environment. And so suicide is definitely like a focal point for this film.
Yeah, I feel like Bella kind of revisits along her journey, like, why did I do that? Like, once she realizes her origin storyline, she's like on this exploration phase of like, she is now, because of the way the movie's set up, her character is now released from like society expectations and shame. So you watch her character go through this, like, why did I do that? what is the world? How can I interact with the world? What's my role in the world? And I thought it was super interesting, that perspective of like, if you were able to come to and interact with the world fresh, like with this, like not having the societal expectations and not having shame being a part of how you interact with the world around you, that was probably my favorite part and why I really liked Poor Things. I did also really like how weird it was. Like, I liked how creatively dynamic it was to be able to, like, I find when movies do that to me, I'm actually like, this is more interesting to me than when you would try to do a real life portrayal, because it's why I love like Wes Anderson. I just find it to be such a poetic experience that allows you to like really pull out and not like not just, I don't know, this make believe, this like fantastical world allows you to actually pull out real life world meaning because of how dramatic the like expression feels. And so that's why I was like, man, Bella's character is so quirky, and there are some one-liners that just really made it clear that like this individual has no shame. And like, what would it look like to be around people, to like think through different things and just not have that a part of who you are and your makeup. And like, you just watch her throughout the movie like bump up against these societal norms, and these other characters who try to give her freedom are still burdened by that. And she, while she develops, her character develops, she never really lets go of that. Like, she still doesn't have shame. She still doesn't have these societal expectations, even when people are like, you should have them. Like, you're now mature enough, you've developed enough to like figure this out. And she's like, nah, not fam. Like, I'm still me. And I just thought that was like, that to me was my favorite part.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway with it was like, along with what you're saying, because I agree, there was just a lot of exploration, like you said, of what it means to be human without societal standards that are kind of ingrained in us from parents and whoever's around us at the time as we grow up. But like, even beyond that, I thought was a cool progression was especially towards the very end, but throughout the whole film, is like autonomy and that right to choose. Like, she kind of regains that right to choose, whether by like demanding it or being given the space to make those choices or whatever it is. And what's really fun is that she's just not a people pleaser, like at all. She's making choices based on emotion, what she prefers, whatever it is. And seeing that journey. And then also like halfway through the film, or towards like the end of the film, seeing how Bella, and all of her quirkiness, she still maintains empathy, and that reaction she has to like seeing a scene of other people struggling and things like that. And yeah, but again, like autonomy and just like having that ability to make your choices. And then, like you said, with wondering who she was before as Victoria, like, why did I make this decision? Like, figuring out what the choice was there. And it was her choice to make. And now that she is, back as Bella, essentially like figuring out how she wants to live and like what is important to her and all that sort of stuff.
Well, and you brought up the empathy piece, which I want to share a quote from that happened between Harry and Bella. So Harry was the guy on the ship, and he's like called himself a cynic, and he tries to show her and like change her perspective, because she comes with this like optimism, and she's in this like learning phase, and he's like, I want to like show you why I'm a cynic and like what the real world is like. And she sees a very visceral reality of the world that she lives in that is very dark. And they have this conversation afterwards, and he says, this is the real point. Don't accept the lie of religion, socialism, capitalism. We are a fucked species. Know it. Hope is smashable. Realism is not. Protect yourself with the truth. And she goes, I realize what you are now, Harry. Just a broken little boy who cannot bear the pain of the world.
You better go off of a stone.
And I'm like, oh, like it was just such a beautiful expression of empathy towards this person, of understanding, of like, you're a cynic because you've been crushed. Like, your heart is hurting so hard that it's protecting itself. and you're just a broken little boy who cannot bear this pain. And she's like, because we just saw her character like weep and cry and bite his hand to like try to give hope, and like she gave all her money away to like give to the poor. It was like this, like she's like, I still have hope, and like I still have this, and I'm sad for you, but like I have empathy for your story. And I thought that was a beautiful one line.
Yeah. I think too, even with that, where calls him a sad little boy, like essentially someone could take that away and be like, oh, that's she's criticizing him. But at the same time, it's not. It's acknowledging the fact that like he is still this tiny human, like we talk about inner child, and he's still this tiny human who was hurt so much that he is now trying to protect himself. So he's cynical. And I also like the idea that these things can coexist. Like you can be hopeful and have empathy, but you can also recognize that it's very painful, that it's very sad, that it's things are disappointing and discouraging, and that everything can just kind of exist at the same time.
Yeah. My last quote I'll share, and it was it's more on this empathy storyline of hers, where the next frame she's in, like she's with the madam, and she's at that place. She's with the madam, and she's working through this experience, and she gets to a point of like, I feel nothing. So she says, a terrible thing has happened, Sweeney. I feel almost nothing, and my empathy is creeping towards something I would describe as contemptuous rage. And the madam, Sweeney goes, this is fabulous. And Bella's like, it is? And then Sweeney says, you are in the dark period before light and wisdom come to you. You must forge through it, and once on the other side, you will be grateful to this moment, but you must keep going. And I'm like,
damn.
That's like what hope is in the darkest parts. It's like it's so gritty. It's that gritty, like hope and wisdom hasn't found you, and you got to just keep going. And I just that was a beautiful. I thought that really captured that experience really well.
Yeah, I also like that idea of the rage coming up. That the rage isn't wrong, right? Like that it's not wrong for her to feel that empathy, also leaning towards like rage and frustration and upset and whatever else, because I don't know where the quote comes from, but it basically talks about how anger can become social action in a way. Like you need that, and that piece adds to like the hope. Like I want things to change, and maybe I can use this to propel me forward or encourage me to want to change things versus just accept it.
Right. What's our rating? I loved it. I loved this movie. It was I loved it. It was weird to have to watch it in a very social setting. I was like, I'm like, okay, like I swear, but it was there was a lot of sex scenes and different things like that. And I was just walking through the airport.
You made a choice.
I made a choice, and I had to just commit. I had a deadline.
You needed the privacy like screen on that part.
Yeah, I'm like in my little airport chair, just like
don't look.
No, I loved it. To me, it was 5 stars.
2, 4.
All right, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, another long one in our year of long movies. I turned it on, and I was like 3.5 hours. That is a lot of movie, but it was paced very, very well. Like there was never a point where I was like, I'm gonna have to turn this off and like do like a half and half one day, half and half the other. Like I was very interested. I was very engaged the entire time. So if you don't like long movies, I totally get it. But I would say this is one where the story does keep you engaged the entire time. There's so much that could be said about this movie. There are so many themes. There's also the factor that it is based off of a true story. So you're not just dealing necessarily with storytelling, you're literally dealing with real life, which I think adds an interesting variable. One thing that I remember specifically about mental health, there is one character, Molly, who you obviously see going through grief. That's like the biggest, we're talking about main characters and you're talking about how their mental health is being affected. I think grief is the most obvious, But there is a storyline with Henry Rowan, who specifically was someone who is portrayed to be experiencing depression as a Native American man in this situation. And I thought it was, I don't know if this was intentional on the filmmaker's part, but there's a scene where he's in the doctor's office, the white doctors, and they keep trying to figure out what's wrong with him. Obviously, these doctors are villains. Like, they have extreme ulterior motives. They are not good people. But I do think that the way that they behave in this scene is very indicative of just the way that medicine has treated mental health historically, and also the way that medicine has treated mental health for people of color historically. I think it's a really interesting dynamic to have seen on screen. But this Henry Rowan is telling these doctors, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing physically wrong with me. I'm sad. And I wrote down the quote specifically of what they say because I thought it was worth having word for word. He says, I'm sad. And they say, well, that's not a health issue for us. And they try to veer the conversation elsewhere. And he says, well, what about my melancholy? And they say, whiskey can help that. And that was his interaction with the doctors. Mm-hmm. And then one scene later, again, this is where I don't know if the director did this on purpose, but it was literally the next scene, if not two scenes later, you see Ernest Burkhart and Molly, and they're fighting over whether or not Molly is going to take these insulin shots. And he starts yelling at her and making fun of the Osage for not trusting medicine, for the way that they handle medicine, saying that it's not real, it doesn't work, and that she needs to get over it and, do this thing that's going to help her, whatever. And I thought it was super interesting, this almost immediate dynamic of watching the white doctors dismiss Henry Rowan's need for mental health care, say that it's not real, literally prescribe whiskey to help his mental health care, to then seeing the white man who feels superior, who feels that his ways are superior, telling Molly that what they believe and what they do and what they think is bullshit, basically. I just thought that was the fact that they were so close together in the movie. I don't know if I would have noticed it had they not been so close together.
Yeah, there's certainly like an element of like bullying. Like you said, there's bullying from these doctors and essentially white people with power. And then beyond that, I feel like they also do it in a way that's very like gaslighting, to be like, well, we know more than you do. We know what it is, we know what's going on. And anything else that you're feeling like emotionally, it doesn't matter. Like, you just gotta like suppress that, put that away. That's not, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So it's a lot of bullying, a lot of gaslighting. And not even allowing people to speak up to say like, this feels wrong and this doesn't sit right in my body, whatever it is, but instead just being like, listen to us. We're not going to listen to what you're saying. We don't really care. And that's the end of it.
Yeah. And giving no space for like, what are you doing to me? Like for Molly, and as we learned later in the film, was very valid for being like, what are you putting in my body? What is this? I want to understand before I just allow you to go putting things into my body. And this like distrust that they're not allowed to have, even though we can all see and know that it is a completely valid distrust. But like you said, they're gaslighted to believe that they're like stupid, or that it is somehow like ignorant of them to question the white man's science or the white man's medicine, when again, as we can see in the movie, there is complete valid reason for distrust. I do think the overarching theme of grief, and also just Lily Gladstone's portrayal of grief, really stuck with me. I remember whenever I was in school and I was a theater minor, one like lesson that really stuck with me is that whenever someone is meant to portray like grief or pain or some extreme emotion, their immediate response is to get very loud and to be very dramatic. And that's why I thought Lily Gladstone's performance was so beautiful, because she portrayed the quiet numbness that comes with prolonged and recurring grief. She's experiencing this loss constantly, not just her family, but her community. She sees what's happening. She doesn't know how to stop it. There's betrayal from her husband, from the people around her. Like, it is just a constant onslaught of grief. And it's not always this like loud, big, sobbing moment. It's this quiet numbness of not knowing how to move forward, looking at this system that gives her no hope. And I thought that was another really interesting thing, is how do you cope with grief when it's connected to systemic issues? When, you know, you lose someone, you have to grieve that. That's hard, and you move through it through community. But how do you process that grief while also being scared that it's going to keep happening over and over again to your people and the people that you love?
It's interesting because when you said that with Lily Gladstone, with her particular performance in this film, I know that Emma Stone was more of the obvious choice. Like, I expected Emma Stone to win, but I really was rooting for Lily strictly because of what you're saying. Like, the portrayal of grief was so different than what we see. And it's not to say that her portrayal was like the right portrayal of, or like how that you should express grief or whatever it is, but to see it in such a quiet manner, and see it so visibly still, like to feel it, be able to feel it. I think it's what you were saying too. In the moment, I don't know necessarily if she was able to process what was actually happening. Like, she can sit there and grieve for her sister and know that she's grieving the loss of her sister, but in the moment, is she recognizing that this is all like connected to generational trauma, or it's connected to like systemic pain? I don't know in the moment if she can really sit there and like articulate that this is what this is from, or what it's stemming from. So to kind of see that quiet processing of grief is like showing like maybe there's not a full understanding there, but she's obviously feeling it. And
Sounds like a great movie.
I need to watch it now.
good. Oh, we told you. Great.
It's worth all 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
What's your guys' rating? How would you rate it?
I think I want to give it 4.5, maybe 5.
5 for you.
But
It's definitely long, but there's, like Kayla mentioned this, it doesn't feel exceptionally long. There's a rhythm to the whole film, like, and it ends where it's supposed to.
Last but not least, Barbie.
Cody, bring it home.
okay, I'm gonna go on a tangent. So to start off, obviously this movie covers the themes of like the patriarchy a lot, and while I realize that as a male, I will never be able to conceptualize the way that women are affected by the patriarchy, as a queer person, I am able to identify with the ideas of like not meeting society's expectations and fitting into social norms and things like that. So I think that's why this movie really connected with me, because I'm not necessarily the target audience, but I still felt really seen, kind of. I was like, wow, me, I relate to that. And then just like the Billy's song, What Was I Made For? It was like, I think we've all had that at some point. Like, you've had that idea at some point of like, what's the purpose of me existing here in this place? So I think that's why it like hits me at the same time that they put that song over the scene of Barbie being like, you know what? While I realize being a human might suck sometimes, it's worth it if I get to experience living. And that's like, for the past, I don't know how many years, every time I'm talking about anything, it's like the idea of going through horrible things, but still, because of that, being able to experience such positive things. So it gives me chills. I have goosebumps right now. Like, I'll take the bad any day because I get to experience the good. I would rather have the bad and still get to have the good than just be neutral all the time. So I don't know. It just, that the movie was really like, I was in the theater with my friend. She was sitting there straight faced. I was crying. Like, I have rewatched the movie like 4 times. It is so good. Definitely, in my opinion, that's Best Picture. Greta Gerwig, Best Directing. Margot Robbie, Best Actress. That should have swept.
It didn't win anything, did it?
That's my feelings. Just, what was I made for?
Oh, yeah.
Robbed after robbed after robbed after robbed.
I do, Cody, exactly what you're saying. Like, we had, not to like name drop, but like Kayla Coleman wrote a blog about this. And if anybody does want to read it, it is called Crying at the Movies. And it's basically about Kayla's experience, like very similar to Cody's, and just feeling this you're encouraged to feel your emotions. No emotion is necessarily bad. Like, we're not labeling them, but to feel is to be human, basically.
Mhm.
And a couple quotes from her blog was like, to feel any emotion is a reminder that I am alive, or to feel anything, even sadness and anger, can be a reminder that you exist. So it's in that same theme. But I think like going also off of like what Cody is saying of that belonging, and kind of understanding like, why am I here? How do I fit in? Do I like how I fit in? Even like society is telling me that I should exist by doing X, Y, and Z, but what if that doesn't align with me? What if that doesn't feel right? And then finding that space where you're able to challenge it and be weird. My favorite out of all of Barbie, basically, I will say, is Weird Barbie. Like that's who I associated with immediately. Like Weird Barbie was my favorite of the entire
Kate
thing.
McKinnon slayed that role. She was perfect for that role.
I think my favorite line at the end, right before the montage or right after, somewhere within the montage, when Barbie says, I want to be a part of making, I don't want to be the thing that is made. That will make me tear up every time in context. That is such a good line. And like looking at it through the lens of being a woman and also thinking of like Greta being this, prominent woman filmmaker, like how much of the female body is centered in movies and media and music and so many things, how much of like the female experience is commodified and objectified to be sold or to be used as entertainment. And so this like literally like the in real life like concept of Greta having this huge hit movie talking about the experience of operating the world as a woman, having that line about wanting to be able to create, not just be the thing that is used for entertainment. And like, I just think that was so beautiful, and I stick on that line all the time.
My favorite part of the movie was definitely the America Ferrera like whole monologue. I mean, I liked Barbie. I totally can see how people are moved by it. It wasn't like I didn't walk away like, oh my gosh, I'm wrecked, that I'm destroyed. This is like the most, I'm going to be watching this forever and always. But that America Ferrera, like whole script, the line, it's so, I'm like, it's just so quintessential to like, yes, the female experience, but also being like a person who maybe doesn't like fit the mold exactly. Like I loved what you shared, Cody, about how this movie impacted you, because I feel like that whole like script and line is like just so representative of what it's like to not to be different, to feel different, but also to feel like you have to be everything and all, like all the things at every time, all the time, of just like, and I know most females can identify that, where it's just like I cannot do all this, but I'm expected to be. And the rules that I have to play by are like so contradictory that it's exhausting, and I don't even know how to exist as like a person. Am I doing it well? Am I not doing it well? Like you just don't feel like you ever know. And so to me that was like, I'm like, wow, that to me was the most powerful moment in the movie outside of the "What Was I Made For" song. And my hot take is I did like the Ken song.
I did too.
Yeah.
That brought me joy. Like that, especially the performance, like the Oscars performance, it really did bring me joy. Like it was fun to watch. What's interesting is America Ferrera's speech in the film. I wanted it to go deeper. I honestly did. I wanted to go a little bit deeper. It didn't feel somebody explained it as like feminism like 101 type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't disagree. Like I don't disagree with that. However, I also had to kind of pull myself away and be like, there's also a ton of backlash coming from this movie of a lot of men saying that, this is propaganda, this is, bullshit, whatever it is. So then I had to pull myself back and be like, okay, well, in the line of feminism, you might be here, but these people might be way back here. So it was kind of like an introductory class, like in college. But I do think it still went deep in other ways, but I did want America Ferrera to maybe go a little bit like harder. But like, again, pulling yourself away and recognizing that like, society, you might be progressed. We kind of talked about this with mental health, where like we might be way further ahead because of what we do and what we've experienced, and our jobs and anything like that. but somebody else might be way back at the beginning. And recognizing that in order to push anybody along, you got to start from the beginning, from the basics, and like move forward.
Back to the basics.
Back to the basics.
Back to the basics.
You better get that call back in there.
And that's why we titled it.
Everybody's Barbie rating. 10 out of 5.
I've given 4 to like everything. This feels so stupid.
I mean,
but
they're all Oscar-nominated movies, so it's not like we're like talking about the worst movies. It's like they all are getting awards and nominated for a reason.
That's true. All right, yeah, I'll stick with my 4. We'll do 4.
Also, one thing about me, if we're
It was
rating
a good
things,
year for movies. I would.
Yeah,
say.
I think the best movie of the year actually was Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour, the movie. 10 out of 10.
where's that Oscar?
Coming to Disney Plus on March 14th.
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored, no.
Although, did you see? I'm assuming we all had the same commercials. The Eras Tour movie was a sponsor of the Oscars or something.
Yeah. Or Disney. I'm assuming Disney was, because they also showed Inside Out 2.
Okay, that would be a good one. I'm really excited for that. Let's talk about that for a second.
We'll
When
have
I
an
saw
episode
the,
about that.
yeah, the commercial looked so good. I was like, that's me right now.
Mhm.
The anxiety one, he got the button.
He got the button.
He's controlling the ship.
Yeah.
So now that we've gone through a list of like the top movies that were all mentioned at the Oscars, all honored at the Oscars, we do have 2 more that were also shown at the Oscars, but only one of them won. The Boy and the Heron. It's a Studio Ghibli film. It mainly focused on grief. It hits on a lot of things with that. So again, mental health related. The other one, Kayla in particular, I know it really resonated with her emotionally. So if you want to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, well, if you haven't seen the new Guardians of the Galaxy, go see it if you want a good cry. I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy is usually like more of like the goofy Marvel movies, and like you kind of go in to have a good time. This movie was so sad, and it uses animals as its vehicle for sadness, so that just like adds on top of how sad that it feels. But also it's so wild how that they can use this story about a raccoon to talk about childhood grief, and the way that it like completely colors how you see and experience the world throughout your entire life. It was so good.
We'll be back with another episode soon where we talk about our very first introductions to mental health. And as always, if you're struggling, you don't have to do any of this alone. You can find resources by going to twaloha.com/find help. You are not weak for needing help. Thanks for joining us this week. We will see you next time.